The previous basket is under review.
Happy Halloween. That means college basketball is here. The countdown has been a long one for me and Fawcett. We've done a lot of preview videos. We appreciate all the support on those videos and really all the support across the Basket Under Review network. You know, the preview content from the Three-Man Weave guys every day. That the Discord is going bananas. People have takes. I had an NEC discourse going back and forth the other day. Obviously, all the shows with what Eamon's doing and Jim and Will, their show is phenomenal. So it's been a fun community to be a part of, and I think if you guys have enjoyed it already, just wait till the games start. But Fawcett, yeah, the season's here. We've got some preseason predictions for you, not necessarily your traditional ones of Final Fours and things like that, but maybe macro trends that we expect to impact games and impact seasons, both from a kind of a style of play and roster management perspective, and stuff to keep an eye on, especially as the season gets started. Maybe even stuff that if you're a gambler, I know there's a few in the Discord, maybe give you something to think about here in the first couple of weeks.
I feel like we definitely have a pretty unique slant here on the show, and we like to think we're bringing something that you don't get from a lot of other shows, outlets, whatever the case may be. So where there are a lot of really awesome preseason prediction, kind of like hot takes type stuff going into the season, which a lot of it is super, super good. I think it's only fitting that our predictions is more trends and stuff like that, and a little bit less of like, this team's going to be a Final Four, this team's going to miss the tournament, and just talk about what are some things that you will see throughout the year from that opening week to midseason to the end of the season, stuff that like trends to predict. And I think with that, I mean, I'm definitely happy that we do have some well-scheduled game. Like there's actually some really interesting matchups the first nights of the season, which has not always been the case. But while there's obviously some good games to look forward to, you can also look forward to some of these trends and keep an eye out for them.
Yeah, I will say I was laughing. You know, it seems like everybody at Basket Under Review had some sort of a preseason prediction type thing going. And, you know, I can't promise we've got the national champion. But if you're curious about zone usage rates across the country, we have that for you. And that I think is where we'll start, because I thought it was fascinating. I actually thought it was so interesting, Fawcett. I was watching an NBA game the other night, and they're just like casually talking about how the team is playing 2-3 zone. 10 years ago, the idea of an NBA team sitting in a 2-3 just seemed absolutely bananas, but teams have really changed how they play. And I think you'll see in college basketball that you see a lot more, I should say. You see a lot more teams that maybe aren't traditional zone teams getting into it a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm going to say this started a little bit with the end of last season, where a lot of these clips showing here are coaches that were really known for never playing zone at all. And still a lot of them didn't play a lot of zone last year, but look at some of these games we're talking about. There was like SEC tournament, conference tournament, NCAA tournament, and some of these teams that don't play a lot of zone in some of the biggest possessions of the year decided to go zone. And while, again, you could say, oh, that's a little bit of them throwing a change up here in a big game, doing something that the opponent isn't as used to. I think that it is a start of a trend that we're going to see more and more. And we have seen that the last couple of years, where there has been slow, just marginal increase in zone usage. I predict that goes up a ton. And I think the reason is pretty clear. Players are just getting better and better offensively as you get older and older. College basketball players generally, they're becoming a lot more offensively talented, and you just have to have something else you can do to these teams. You can't just sit in your same shell, man defense all game and do the same thing. These players are too good at figuring out. Also, I think as these players get older, it's also easier for them to learn zones. Again, if you're a really good high school player nowadays, your high school might not be playing zones, or the prep school these guys go to, but more experience in college. They see it, they're more prepared. And while we have seen the zone usage across college basketball at all levels kind of go up slowly, I do think we take a really big jump. And I will also say, just, privately, not going to say who, but there have been some fairly prominent coaches in the sport who have not played a possession of zone over the last couple of years that have told me that they plan on playing zone this year. And I think as you are trying to slow down some of these great offenses, as the game starts to get officiated a little bit differently. I just think you're going to have a zone that isn't just a change up novelty, throw it in after a timeout, see what happens. You got to have a zone that you're going to be comfortable playing in an NCAA tournament for a 3 or 4 minute stretch. And yeah, I think that's going to really change the way a lot of these games look.
So let me ask you this, like for the for the less X and O inclined fan who think here's 2-3 zone and they think, oh man, someone's going to shoot the doors off of them and they're just going to make a million threes. It strikes me that yes, while teams are going to shoot perimeter jump shots against zones, that's natural, that some of the advancements in how teams play zone have made it maybe a little less of a permission to bomb away. Can you explain a little bit about some of the changes you might be looking for in terms of how teams play in a zone?
Yeah, if you can think of the 2-3 zone with the 2 players at the top, the 2 kind of wings near the corner, and then there's going to be someone in the middle. You look, 15 years back, you look like a Boeheim zone, and think about those 2 wings that were almost like flat with the baseline. They were so low, and that was that opportunity that you had a lot of time to get those simple wing threes. Well, now those wings are playing so much higher in a lot of zones. You're also seeing teams really try to play those guards higher and push the ball to one side of the floor so then you can start to stack your zone. And you really don't see that same level of just straight point to wing 3-point opportunities. You also see teams that are doing a lot better, in my opinion, of when the ball goes into the high post, not freaking out. I mean, we could also talk about like Joe Gallo and Merrimack, like so much, just the best teacher of the 2-3. But one of the things that as all these teams have started watching Joe Gallo and how Merrimack plays a 2-3 zone, when they throw it into the high post, people don't freak out and they don't stunt down and have that opportunity where like you throw it into the high post, he pivots, throws it to, as soon as it gets into the high post, teams just like will match up and go and find shooters and all the kind of typical stuff that you used to see teams getting threes out of. It's just, yeah, again, it's not the case anymore. So your 2-3 zones now look a lot different than they did pre 3-point revolution. And while there still are a lot of teams that play a 2-3 willing to give up a lot of threes, there's still a lot that play 2-3 and don't give up a ton of threes. And I think that's, especially if we're talking about the high major level, I do think we're going to see more aggressive extended zones that are still kind of geared towards let's kind of, confuse the defense, make them throw it into the high post and make like a 5-man a playmaker and still try to protect that 3-point line a little bit.
I was going to say, like, yeah, at some point, a guy catching in at the high post and either driving on a rim protector or taking a mid-range 2 is a better outcome for a defense than collapsing to the middle of the zone and giving up catch and shoot corner 3. Like that is just reality wise. Like if you're sitting there making those trade-offs, coaches will take that any day of the week. And so, yeah, there'll be times that a guy can really crush it. There's a way of beating any defense, but I do think it is a different world we're living in. And part of that is because it's become harder to do some of the things defensively that, used to really stunt scoring in college basketball. I know the, really great video that Jordan Sperber just put out about the no-biddle defense and how that has basically died because of the charge rule changes and the inability to slide under guys and take charges. But, efficiency across the board is up in college basketball. And I think when you combine the rule changes, which, charge rule, certainly the continuation is one of them. I think you'll see continue more and more things that benefit offense. Combine that with better players in college basketball. As you said, older players, more skilled players. It's a huge, I think, change in landscape in terms of what, is there for offenses. And I think as we've talked about maybe in our first video with the new Basket Under Review look was that, at the end of the day, there's better point guard play and better scoring guards in college basketball than there have been in a long time. You combine all those things together, I think you're going to see a lot of games in the 80s in college basketball this year. I think you're going to see games, faster pace, more possessions, higher scoring, more scoring runs back and forth. This won't be the NBA. The NBA is a different level of efficiency and different level of pace, but I think there will be fewer and fewer teams playing those grinded out 60-point games and more playing in the 80s.
Yeah, I think that you look at every rule change that's come to the sport over the last 10 years. pretty much all of them were in favor in the offense. That's one of those things where I didn't know, like, I don't know if I necessarily loved the interpretation of the charge rule when they were charging, or when they were calling so many charges. But at the same time, I was like, this is defense's only way of punching back. Every other rule has been weighted towards the offense, and that was the one kind of, okay, this is tilted towards the defense, and obviously that has been cleaned up and changed. I think the way that you start to see dribbling and the carry, the gather step, which isn't technically in the college rule book, but is pretty much officiated like the gather step. The zero step is a thing. Everything has been geared towards offense. And I do think the insertion of even more European players that are older, you look at when we talk about a lot of the top European guys coming in, it's pretty much most of them are like, their offense is super, super good. A couple of defensive guys, we've pointed out some good defenders, but generally speaking, this new insertion of talent is largely coming on the offensive end. And while there is more retention of players that are staying in college longer than instead of going to the NBA earlier, well, still the guys that are going early are those big wings that could still provide a lot of defensive help. Those guys are still going to the NBA relatively early, where it is the point guards, the fives that can offensive rebound and put up points, or be dominant post players with their back to the basket, which we know just haven't been going to the NBA quickly for a long time now. It does seem like scoring is only going to increase with all these things. And I guess my question for you, Kevin, as we look at the top of the sport, we look at the final four picks from everyone, including from Basket Under Review. Like, you're going to see a Houston, for example, a popular pick for a lot of people. You're going to see like a Tennessee pick to finish near the top of the SEC, maybe win the SEC, be in that mix as well. Like, when you look at these teams that I would say are more defensive teams, well, do you have any thoughts that, like, well, if this just becomes a year where scoring kind of wins out, like do you think that the defense wins championship things is dead? How do you think this affects particularly some of these title contending teams that would pride themselves on defense before offense?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it's also like I think Houston is a fascinating example of it, because I think Houston's a team that had ways to individually generate shots, even if it wasn't the most efficient offense in the world. But they had guys that could create their own, and they could dominate the offensive glass. Like, Houston's elite offensive numbers on KenPom are not a function of their elite shooting efficiency. It's second shot offense. And then it's probably most importantly that they don't turn the ball over. They put the ball on the rim. And, I wonder, without their best post scorer from last year, Juwan Roberts, and their best boogie guard, LJ Cryer, replacing both of those guys with freshmen, are they as good offensively? Do they take a step back on that end of the floor? And if they take a step back offensively in a year where everybody else is taking a step forward, that to me is the most compelling case for why Houston wouldn't be number one. And I still have them number one, but partially because they're sort of broken KenPom, right? Like, their analytics profile is going to be elite. And I, quite frankly, don't have a better way of approaching my personal national rankings in the preseason, other than like what would I do that like most mirrors end of season KenPom. That's like my goal when I do those things. But I do think if you're like scripting out, like, why is this the Houston team to win it all? I think the positive argument is the talent level, the pros. I think on the negative side of it, it's even with the talent, is it as dynamic as if in terms of shot creation in a season where there are some elite shot makers on pretty much every high level team.
Yeah, I hate to look at last year and be like, oh, well, like, Houston can't win a championship playing the style they did because they were an absolute, whisker away from winning a championship last year. But ultimately, in a game that Houston had good control of, they just didn't have the shot making and they didn't have the offensive execution to win that, where Florida did, despite, some of the flaws that Florida had. So I'll be really interested to see. And this will also be like Houston winning this year. And I do think that Houston has a couple more offensive weapons that I like this year than last year. And I still don't think they're going to be very good or I don't think they're going to be great offensively this year. I mean, man, a Houston championship win would be the last stand of defense wins championships. Looking at some of the other teams that we expect to be really good, and like a Purdue, like a Kentucky, like a UConn, Florida, Illinois. Like some of these teams I think are going to be much more offensively focused than defensively focused. It's like, well, if this is the year that defense wins out, then it'll be start interesting to see next portal season if suddenly it's the stoppers getting the big bags.
Yeah, and quite frankly, again, it'll be interesting. And this transitions well to our next topic. If it's already going to be hard on defenses, and it's already going to be hard on teams that, like Houston, that are defensively oriented. The other thing Houston's so great at is how physical they are. And one of the things that I think is going to be a huge story early in the season, based on from what I've heard from referees, but also from speaking to coaches and watching exhibitions, there's going to be a ton of fouls called as refs try to remove physicality from the game.
So that's going to be something that I do find interesting, because I feel like we have seen this happen not just in college basketball, but in the NBA. We see it in the NFL. We see it in the NHL, where it starts the season and there are so many fouls called, and they're trying to like set the tone of we are taking out some of this physicality. And then it always kind of seems to fade away. And they don't want to be calling 100 fouls every single game. So we start to see it early. And then a couple weeks in the season, all these like points of emphasis that are being talked about start to slip away. I don't know. I think that's my one thought and kind of question for you is I kind of feel like we've heard this before. We've heard that they're going to start legislating out. There's points of emphasis. They're going to legislate out physicality. And for the first couple of weeks, we see it. And then it comes down to the case, and you hear coaches talking about it too, where it's like, well, if we foul every single possession, refs are never going to call it. And that's some teams that do really well with physicality have done that. So I do think to an extent, I approach it with some level of skepticism, just because I feel like we've been down this road, not just in college basketball, but other sports. But, could this be the year? But and I do think ultimately we're still probably going in that direction, and we're going to see. That's part of the reason that I do think we're going to see scoring up. It's part of the reason that I do think zone usage is going to be up, because again, as good players get into foul trouble early, you can hide them a bit easier in a zone. We'll see, but will the game be officiated the same way in January as it does in November? I mean, we'll see, but it actually did shock me, Kevin, as I went back to the NCAA tournament and looked for some of these fouls. There are some of these fouls that look a lot like what we're seeing in exhibitions that are saw. So maybe I've overblown it a little bit, but that's just kind of my first thoughts.
Yeah, I was going to say this montage is just incredible of touch fouls in the NCAA tournament. If you like to roll your eyes at nonsense like this is the video for you. Look, I think it's hard to know for sure how it will be enforced after the first couple of weeks, and I think you're right that especially into conference play, the teams will be allowed to defend a little bit more physically. But I don't know. I went to Northwestern Illinois State, and there were 69 free throws in that game. I didn't even think it was that physical a game. And the day before, the same ref, Paul Selk, who is already a high foul caller, called the UConn Michigan State game. There were 74 fouls in that game. If you go to the Film Room chat channel on the Discord, you'll see just an incredible video that one of our friends in the Discord from UConn posted of like the dumbest foul call of all time. Like, just like, what are we doing? Like, play basketball, guys. Like, move on. 74 free throws in that game. Paul Selk also had the Northwestern DePaul game on 10-19. I was there. 82 free throws. That was the painful look from you, Fawcett. Really painful.
Yeah. I keep thinking, I mean, like, who's this for? You see, like, fans, I would say generally seem to prefer a little bit more physicality. It's like coaches talk about how they want to legislate out some physicality, and then they continue to say like, oh, we foul all the time because refs can't call it, and they want to be able to do it too. And I think that we are all in agreement where no one wants to see 60 plus free throws in games. So I also think when we hear about the increase in foul calls, I think one of my questions is just, well, who is this for? Who wants this? And I don't think anyone wants to return to basketball of the 80s and 90s, But at the same time, I think teams or fans, coaches, I think there's some extent where they like the element of physicality of the game and they don't love to see stoppages.
Yeah, I mean that's the problem. I mean, the biggest problem is like these games are going to take forever. I mean, again, Loyola DePaul was a 2-hour and 50-minute basketball
Oh
game
my
without
Lord.
a TV network. But the commercial breaks were theoretically a little shorter. Like the North. I left the Northwestern game at the U8 last night. I'm not proud of it, but I have to admit when I say, hey, I'm not saying for the end of a 30-point game in October. It was almost 9:00 on the dot, so 2-hour game at the U8 of a blowout. Like, I think there's going to be some real like head scratching, long, ugly college games in November. That's something we'll have to deal with. And that's okay. But I do think as the season goes on, not only will you see a little more physicality, but I think you'll see just more parity. And I think it's something we talk about in college football right now for those that are college football fans. Like, oh, the days of a team dominating the SEC and going 12-0 or dominating the Big Ten and going 12-0, those seem to be a little more over. Like everybody can beat everybody. And I think when you think about the roster dynamics, Fawcett, like I think a lot about the variance in terms of the amount of money spent team to team. And I wouldn't say that there are there's no variance. Obviously there is, but I think there's enough more teams that spent a lot of money and enough more teams that are at least like in the ballpark where they were competitive and built a real roster. Last year, I think there was probably the biggest divide between the haves and the have-nots in high major world. I think this year, for the most part, like serious contenders spent real money. And I think the rosters are closer because of that. Maybe teams will emerge at the top, but the gap between second or third and 10th or 11th, I think in a lot of these leagues is going to be smaller than ever before. I think there's not going to be a lot of, truly atrocious teams. There's going to be a lot of 11 and 9s and 12 and 8s and 9 and 11s in the league play. That'll be an adjustment for people. It'll also, quite frankly, kind of feed into this NCAA tournament expansion discourse, right? If we have, if we have all these teams that go 500 in their league and they all sneak in, okay, well, there's the spots for everybody. I don't know. I think it's something to watch. I don't think people necessarily realize that the playing field is leveling some and the talent is spread a little bit more. I see in college football, and this is where I think basketball and football differ. I think in college football, the biggest parity driver is that the depth of the elite teams, the Georgias, the Alabamas, like they couldn't stack a 3 deep of guys that would start at the rest of the SEC like anymore. And that has changed parity. And I don't think basketball is quite like that. I don't think it ever has been. But I think because all the good mid-major players move up, I think because there's fewer, I think because good players will stay a little longer, there's like more avenues to get good or get relevant in college basketball quicker. And I think because of that, there will be fewer just disaster show teams, but also fewer like truly elite ones.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see as well how it kind of feels like there's not diminishing returns with more money. Like, yeah, it's always great to have like more money. But a couple of years ago when there was a high major team rolling out a $1 million roster and another one was rolling out a $4 million roster, that gap in talent was gigantic. Now the difference between like 4 million and the teams that are spending reportedly 15 or 20, like, yeah, the roster that's 15 and 20 is still like better, don't get me wrong, but it's not 5 times better despite having 5 times more. So it just seems to also be a level where, like you said, the floor of a lot of these teams is their spending got up to a little bit more competitive. And even though you're hearing some like crazy numbers, it's like, well, if a couple $1 million gets you Denzel Aberdeen, it's like, yeah, that's a great piece to have, but is that the huge? I mean, I guess we'll see, and I'm curious to see what Kentucky fans think of that. But it does seem like there's going to be some more competitiveness there. And then, Kevin, the one thing that is interesting to me, and you can talk parity in kind of 2 ways. One, I would say the literal talent on the roster is like literal how good is a team, and then there's parity in terms of what their record is. And the one thing that I'm kind of curious about, will this increase parity or not is just like these unbalanced schedules.
Yeah,
I mean, there's like the fact that some of these teams might have similar parity, but wow, if one team can get very lucky, and looking at the schedules in different high major leagues, the fact that the leagues are getting bigger and the schedules are so unbalanced, yes, I guess that could hypothetically make a team that's bad and they get a tough break, have a really difficult schedule. Okay, well they're in trouble. But when it comes to that middle of the league, I wonder exactly in a bunch of these leagues how that unbalanced scheduling kind of plays a role.
For sure, especially again, not only is the schedule unbalanced, but it seems like the motivations in terms of how you're creating the unbalanced schedule are very inconsistent, right? Like there's leagues where like, okay, the only teams you're going to double up on are your rivals. Okay, great. Well, rivalry games, number one, have like the most variance, right? Because there's more emotion, there's more juice, whatever. But also like you have these rivalry games, like okay, like Duke gets to play North Carolina twice a year, but Boston College gets to play Notre Dame twice. Like, I mean, in a league where you're playing 18 games and you only play one team twice, and you might get a really lucky draw this year with home and road. Like, yeah, I think the unbalanced schedule plays a huge role in that. And that like what's like 12-8 in the ACC for one team might be very different, or 12-6, I guess, because they play 18 games now. It's going to be way different than 12-6 in the ACC for a different schedule. And if you catch the right breaks, you're the right travel bumps, and I think there'll also be more just like kind of head scratcher results. Like, we had a schedule loss, right? Like we had a tricky road trip out west right after this. Like that's how the NBA works. I think that's how college is going to be. I think the idea a regional double round robin creates a true champion, but what we have now is going to be much more segmented and much more like this is just the path to Selection Sunday.
And it's actually funny to me because in a college basketball world where everyone complains about everything, everyone cries unfairness to everything, I actually don't feel like people are as rattled by the unbalanced scheduling as they should be. Like I'm surprised we don't have, for there to be so much fan uproar about like so many perceived slights in college basketball. Like some of the schedules that some of these teams are getting tasked with, and versus like similar quality teams that are getting much easier breaks, because that's just like there's no way to avoid that. I'm not saying that any of these leagues are doing a bad job of scheduling. It's just when you have super unbalanced schedules in like an 18 or 20 game league schedule, like there's no great way of doing it. I just don't think we've seen the kind of uproar from like fans or like coaches that there actually probably should be. And I guess if we're still making this somewhat of a prediction show, I think that changes this year. I think fans and coaches start to get a little wiser to the fact that their team might be getting like shafted in a lot of ways by an unbalanced schedule, and you're going to start to see a lot more discussion about what to do about this. It just obviously we've had plenty of talk about conferences like expanding and what that has meant. I don't think the unbalanced schedule has actually gotten as much talk as I think it probably should, and I do wonder if that becomes a bigger talking point this year.
That's a great point. It's a great point. All right, last thing I wanted to address is I don't think people are prepared, and it may not fully happen this year, but I think we are headed quickly to a world where mid-season recruiting is a real thing. And filling a roster spot, whether it be from Europe or now with some of these G League players, filling a roster spot and like scrambling to get him eligible because, oh crap, we lost our point guard and we need a guy, or hey, we could really use a big, or I remember UConn kicked the tires on this after Maui last year. I don't know if that was ever publicly reported. I guess I'm just going to put it out there, I guess, at this point. Like UConn came home from Maui and was like, man, like we need a guy. Like we need to look into this. And it's hard. Like if you're going European, like the timing for the visas and getting them into school and getting them cleared, like it's not going to be easy to turn. But I already know of multiple high-level programs that are interested in adding a potential European piece at the mid-year. And that's not to mention all these guys that the tires are getting kicked on in terms of the G League or Overtime Elite or some of the other avenues that I think people will continue to. And again, that's with no pressure. That's at 0-0. What type of pressure is there going to be to find ways to get guys into school after that underwhelming start or feeling the hot seat? Oh, if only we have, we can pull $500,000 together. We can try to take this kid who was playing in the G League last year. That might help us. Like That's a very real thing. And I don't think people will love it across the sport, but I think it will be an impactful thing to watch. And I would not be surprised if a couple people can pull it off this year. Down the line, I think the snowball effect will be pretty substantial.
Yeah, you teased this in a previous video, and I was like, wow, like, I thought it was like a face melter of a not a hot take, but like just a possibility that I hadn't thought about. And since then, talking especially in the context of these European players, man, I think that there would be opportunities for a couple of reasons. Like one, these European guys, their contracts are not like watertight, and a lot of them do not have big buyouts. A lot of them you can get out of in the middle of the season, and it's kind of a two-way street. You see guys in Europe pros getting cut mid-season, or you do see guys leaving, paying a relatively small buyout and going to bigger clubs. And I'll give you kind of one more, Kevin, that I was thinking about, because in European basketball, there's a lot of marquee guys that will not sign with teams, and the season will start, and they will stay on the market because they know the first time one of the marquee teams either loses a big game, has an injury, realizes that someone's not as good, whatever that this player was worth preseason was like that number, like times it, add 25%, add 30%. Could you imagine if one of these guys that was in, like, we'll call it a $2 million European player, like one of the like marquee European, can you imagine if he says, hey, I'm going to come to college basketball, but I'm not signing in August. I'm not going to come to camp. Yeah, I'm not coming for October for exhibition, but yeah, I'm going to be available for you like when you need it. And the first time that a Duke, a Kentucky, a North Carolina, when they need one of those guys, there's a break glass in case of, like, I even wonder if that's a possibility. And now, of course, you're talking about some of the situations like, yeah, you need to like get a guy a visa, you need to get him into school, stuff like that. But if we're really starting to see the European pro nature of college basketball, where guys are on 1 year contracts, they move up or down freely. Well, the next step in that, if it's is like Europe, where it's not even everyone's on a 1 year deal and they're moving every single year up or down. It's like, well, these guys do go get bought out and go up mid-season, or they, you could also we could even talk about loans. Could you imagine if KK Mega was like, oh yeah, Kentucky, we'll loan you this guy for this 21, 22-year-old. We know he's only going to have a year of eligibility anyways. Yeah, we'll put him on loan to you, and Kentucky plays KK Mega, $150,000, nothing to Kentucky. They pay the player a half year's wait. I even wonder, could that be part of the thing? So I was just in Europe for 2 weeks talking to some coaches about this, kind of getting so for you to bring it up now, it's fresh of mind. And you mentioned that you're like, I don't know if everyone around college basketball is going to love this. Man, if the G League stuff is any indication of how people are going to handle some of these, I don't know if a mid-season trade deadline acquisition is going to be taken too kindly.
Hey, I mean, it's hard because on one hand, you may not believe it's the best thing for the game, but there's no incentive for a college coach to operate in the best interest of the game. The incentive is to win. It's to win now. It's to win a lot. And if you have an opportunity to add talent, you're going to do it. So I'm interested. I will go on the record right now and say that at least one high major team will add a player at the mid-year who will not redshirt, who will come in and play right away this year. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a lot more than that, but I will go on the record and say one will do it this year, and that will be the domino that begins a trickle down effect moving forward. So hope everybody enjoyed our different spin on preseason takes, preseason predictions. I am going to make you, Fawcett. I'm going to make you pick a national champion because I know you haven't done that. I don't think.
No, yeah, we got asked in the Basketball Review channel. I was like, is that like more of a podcaster writing staff thing? I stayed out of it. I think I even maybe said this on a previous video, so I'm going to reiterate it. Not a hot take here, but I don't know if too many other people on Basketball Review picked them, but like I think it's the team with the best point guard and one of the top European guys and one of the best front court guys. I think it's Purdue. That'll be my pick. And if you want to tie it into a lot of what we're talking about, I think this is going to be an offense wins championships year. And I see Purdue as the best offensive team. So I will say that's my national champion, and even tie it in a little bit to today's video topics.
Good stuff. Well, my pick and the rest of the staff's picks are out or going out soon. over at Basket Under Review. You check that out. Obviously, all the work, all the podcast content, etc. And then follow both of us on social media at CBB_Central for me, at Eric Fawcett _ for you. Nailed it.
Yep.
Boom. Mid-season form already for these two podcasters. We're ready for the season. We appreciate you guys riding with us. Should be a fun 4 months to Selection Sunday.